When my grandma, Fei Li, was 3 years old, she immigrated from China to the United States through Angel Island, an immigration center located in the San Francisco Bay. I'd always heard about Angel Island growing up, but mostly through my California public school education, and never from my grandma herself. My family is from the Bay Area, and so when my journalism class at Northwestern University traveled to San Francisco on a reporting trip, my mom and I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to bring my grandma back to Angel Island. For me, I wanted to use this trip as an opportunity to learn more about the Hom family history and their experience as immigrants. For my grandma, I hoped revisiting Angel Island would mean reconnecting with her roots. But she had other ideas. Why do you want to see Angel Island again?
Your mom wanted me to go.
My grandma wasn't giving the most precise answers, so I turned to my mom's cousin, Michael Hom, who's known as the Hom family historian, for some insight.
My dad never spoke of what it was like when he was growing up or what he remembered about being in China or the journey back. And because it was probably so hard and not something they wanted to remember. It just wasn't ever discussed. But then again, I just feel like I got interested in it because I wanted to know more about my own self.
I wanted to look into our family's immigration history for the same reasons as Michael. Growing up as biracial and third-generation Chinese, I've always felt somewhat disconnected from that part of my culture. However, I was fortunate enough to grow up around my grandparents. My grandpa was vocal about his experiences as an immigrant, perhaps because he didn't immigrate until he was in college. He always told us stories about having no shoes and working in the rice fields in Taiwan. Meanwhile, my grandma essentially had no memory of China or crossing the Pacific. Her parents had their first child, Lillian, in China in 1917. Then they moved to Minneapolis, where they had the next 6 kids. Then they moved back to China, where they had my grandma.
But then the Japanese invaded, and we had to leave. So that's how I came into the picture onto Angel Island. I don't know, maybe I didn't even know the language then, English. Maybe I just knew Chinese and knew how to just answer yes or no, maybe. I don't remember saying anything being interrogated, but my mother was interrogated.
When we got to Angel Island, I hoped that reading about the history in the museums and hearing from the guides would spark her memory. Under the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, her family would have been interrogated by immigration officials, so I wondered if she knew what kind of questions they asked her mother.
She didn't think anything. She told them what she told them, that, I was her daughter. That's it. So I guess we didn't stay long, didn't have to, because all the other kids were here already. All my siblings were here because they were already born in Minnesota, so maybe that helped also.
Yeah.
They didn't need another child to come back home with it. I would be the 8th child and a daughter.
But soon, I realized she really didn't know much more.
I don't remember a thing. Maybe if I were under hypnosis, maybe I'd come back.
Most of her answers went like this, but one in particular stood out to me.
Usually when people go through this, and probably my mother did, and maybe they treated her well with me, a baby, but they generally don't talk about it. Even my brother being in World War II, came back from Europe, he didn't want to talk about it.
Just like Michael's experience talking about the past with his father, my grandma's parents also did not seem to want to have those conversations. I asked our park ranger, John Claggett, and he said he's noticed the same reluctance with a lot of visitors who immigrated through the island.
Very common. A lot of people don't want to talk about it because it wasn't a positive experience, and some people don't want to talk about it because they came in as a paper son or a paper daughter.
Paper sons refer to Chinese people who purchased documentation claiming they had blood relatives in America in order to get through immigration. My grandma's family almost brought in a paper son. They changed my grandma's birth certificate from April to September so their birthdays were far enough apart they could plausibly be siblings. They didn't end up bringing in the paper son, but her birth certificate still says September. And until I was maybe 12 or 13, I grew up thinking her birthday was really in September. In this case, that discrepancy during my grandma's immigration teaches us about a part of history. But in other cases, those inconsistencies during the immigration process prevent us from learning more. Michael has tried to learn more about history through the National Archives and Records Administration, which keeps records of all immigration interviews and passenger manifests. However, he ran into some technical difficulties during that process.
Those are hard to track because your great-grandfather's name is sometimes recorded as Hom, H-O-M. Other times it's recorded as T-O-M, Tom. It all depends on whatever the immigration official heard.
So much of the Hom immigrant story was buried, and my grandma, being the youngest of the siblings, has very little memory of China. Even when she went to China to try to rediscover her roots, that part of history was also concealed from her.
The first time was 1985 with Auntie Jean and Uncle Richard. We went on a group tour. Yeah, we couldn't find the house except Auntie Lou drew us a map and we did finally find it. The taxi driver, yeah. He helped us find it, but the communists were there and they were occupying our house and they wouldn't let us in, so we climbed on top of the taxi. He let us, and we peeked in and we saw the laundry hanging in the courtyard and things like that.
There's like huge gaps in that story that I just, at this point, I don't know if they're ever going to be filled in. And as our family moves farther away generationally from the immigrant experience, I hope to be able to retain some of that.
Michael was right that some gaps in the Hom family history may never be filled in. So for now, all I can do is appreciate and cherish what my grandma does remember about her life. Because even if there are gaps in her stories, what I learned from them is still valuable. For instance, my mom walked away with a better understanding of why my grandma is the way she is today.
I've always known her to be someone who felt very capable and didn't have to rely on people. She was getting around San Francisco on her own, speaking English. She often had to translate for them. So I'm sure being the youngest, she had to fend for herself a lot more.
I learned that this independence she had growing up also gave her the freedom to break some rules.
When I didn't think I would get much out of Chinese school, I would think though, you know, thinking back now, I would regret it. I did regret it.
Regret what?
Playing hooky.
Playing hooky at Chinese school ended up being a barrier to learning more about her family history.
Yeah, I wish I knew a lot more. I wish I had asked, but being that I wasn't very good in Chinese, I guess I didn't talk that much to my mother about the past and what she endured in coming over, and but the details I didn't think of till more recently.
Similarly, I didn't think of what to ask her until I got older. And I really didn't ask much until I started this project.
Yes, I enjoyed talking to you guys about the past. I've really never had that experience. We never had time, whether with my daughters or with my granddaughters. There was never really a time except that in little clips of the past.
My mistake going into this project was thinking I could go about telling her story in a very structured way. I thought I could give a comprehensive history of her immigration experience in childhood. Instead, I found out random bits and pieces, but the missing pieces helped me to appreciate what I do learn even more. And the laughs and memories shared during these discussions have been the most rewarding part of all.
I think you should prop up. You want some pillows?
I
behind you?
know, but this pillow.
It's just,
Hand me a pillow.